My daughter-in-law humiliated me in front of our entire neighborhood on social media, calling me a senile old fool and painting me as the family problem. You know, when you're 67, people expect you to quietly fade away into the background, but I always liked my life in Maplewood Hills, Ohio. My name's Walter King, and let me tell you, being a grandpa doesn't mean you stop being a man. I just sat down with my morning coffee in my little home office. My late wife's picture smiled down from the shelf above my cluttered desk, and sunlight spilled across old family photos. My 3 grandkids on a fishing trip, my son and his wife at their wedding, everyone looking so happy. I thought it was going to be another quiet day, maybe working on my model trains or checking the garden. But my hand slipped, and the coffee mug crashed to the floor, splashing everywhere, because my eyes were glued to my laptop. On the neighborhood Facebook page, there it was, a long post from my daughter-in-law, Lindsay. Sometimes family needs tough love. Walter's losing his grip and his constant complaints are dragging us down. Someone has to say it. Nearly 400 likes. Dozens of supportive comments, some from neighbors I'd known for 20 years, others from people I barely recognized. Words like courageous and so sorry you have to deal with him, Lindsay. I sat there frozen, feeling every year in my bones, reading the comments over and over. Did they really think I was crazy? Had I become someone my own family could push aside just to make things easier? Lindsay was my son's wife, mother to my 3 grandkids, the woman I'd welcomed into the family. Now she was the one publicly trashing my name, right there for everyone to see. I grabbed my phone and tried calling her, straight to voicemail. Her cheerful message almost made me laugh. Not one answer. On the 3rd try, I realized she was deliberately ignoring me. I stared at my own reflection in the black screen, searching for the person everyone now seemed to believe was losing it. The coffee crept into the floorboards, but I couldn't even make myself get up and clean it. All I could do was sit and feel the sting of betrayal. I tried to calm myself, deep breaths, just like the doctor had told me after my heart attack 2 years ago. But how are you supposed to avoid stress when your own family turns on you? I forced myself to get up, paced to the window, and looked out at Lindsay's big 2-story house down the block, all bright white paint and carefully trimmed hedges. My son, David, had parked his truck in their driveway. Was he part of this too? Had they talked about me over breakfast, laughing about how to get rid of old Walter? It was only Thursday, but it already felt like the worst day of my life. Even Mrs. Connors, who always brought me cookies at Christmas, had commented, "Hang in there, Lindsay. Old folks can be so stubborn." It burned. I wasn't confused, and I sure as heck wasn't senile. At 67, I designed half the subdivisions in this part of Ohio, built schools and community centers, mentored new engineers, and still did my own taxes. But none of that mattered now, apparently. Now, one Facebook post had wiped out my whole reputation. Yesterday, we'd argued over something small, the new parking rules in our HOA. Lindsay came marching over with her clipboard, HOA badge, and that voice she used when she thought she was being helpful. "Walter, there are rules about cars in the driveway." "Only 2. I'd told her it was silly. My grandkids visit every weekend. Where does she want them to park? In the next town?" She'd clicked her pen, put on that icy smile, and said, "The rules apply to everyone, Walter." We voted. It's about property values. But I could see in her eyes that it was about control. She wanted me to back down, to let her play queen of the neighborhood. And when I didn't, she went nuclear, humiliating me in front of everyone. I stared out at her house, the manicured lawn, the shiny new SUV. Everything about her screamed, "Look at me, I'm in charge." Well, I'd seen enough. My own son, David, had stood behind her yesterday, not saying a word in my defense. That cut deeper than anything. The more I thought about it, the more my anger cooled into something sharper. I closed my laptop, cleaned up the coffee, and started thinking. If Lindsay wanted a fight, she was about to find out that old men don't always go quietly. 40 years of building things had taught me how to solve problems, and I wasn't about to let my family push me out of my own life. Then my phone buzzed. A text from someone unexpected. Saw Lindsay's post. Hang in there, Walt. Not everyone believes her. It was Mike Keller, my neighbor 3 doors down, the guy everyone called when their computers broke. He never posted much, but he knew more about what went on in the neighborhood than anyone. Maybe, I thought, it was time to stop sitting around feeling sorry for myself. If they wanted a battle, I'd give them one. I grabbed my keys, straightened my shirt, and stepped out into the bright Ohio morning, determined to set things right. The walk down Sycamore Lane to Lindsay and David's house was short but felt heavier with every step. My mind raced, thinking about what to say. Should I plead for understanding, or just demand answers? By the time I reached their perfect porch, my resolve had hardened. No more apologizing for existing. I pressed the doorbell, listening to the cheerful chime echo inside. Footsteps approached, then the door swung open. Lindsay stood there, crisp and composed, not a hair out of place, her eyes flickering with the surprise she couldn't quite hide. "Walter! What brings you by this early?" Her tone oozed innocence, as if she didn't know exactly why I was there. I kept my voice steady. "You know why. That post, delete it." She put a hand on her hip, tilting her head just so. "Which post?" "I share a lot of community updates." The game had started. She wanted me to beg, to admit guilt in her little court of public opinion. I wasn't playing. "The one calling me senile, embarrassing, and a problem for the family." "You know exactly which one." She shrugged, her lips pursed in a faint smile. "Walter, I only shared my honest feelings about family challenges." "Surely you support free speech?" I leaned in, lowering my voice. "Free speech isn't a license to destroy someone's reputation. You've crossed a line." She didn't blink. "Sometimes the truth is hard to hear. If you don't like it, maybe reflect on your own behavior." The confidence in her eyes made me realize she didn't expect consequences. In her mind, she'd already won. Movement behind her caught my eye. David appeared in the hallway, looking tired, still in yesterday's work clothes. He stood awkwardly, hands in his pockets, not meeting my gaze. "Dad, can we just talk this through?" I stared at my own son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, whose college tuition I'd scraped to pay, now standing silently by while his wife shredded my name. "You want to talk? Your wife just lied about me to half the state. And you let her." David shifted uncomfortably. "It's complicated. Lindsay's just worried about the neighborhood, about the kids. She's worried about control." I shot back. "And you're letting her run our family into the ground." Lindsay's smile turned thin and brittle. "You see? This is exactly what I mean by emotional outbursts and poor judgment." She was trying to twist my anger as proof of her accusations. Clever. I took a breath, forcing myself calm. "Delete the post." "No. I won't. The community deserves honesty," she said, as if she was some kind of hero. David looked away, pretending to study the carpet. I stepped back from their doorstep. "Fine," I said. "You've made your choice, both of you. Just remember, every action has a consequence. You want to play games, you better know the rules." Their expressions faltered as I turned and walked away, but I didn't look back. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. By the time I reached my own front porch, my anger had settled into cold resolve. Lindsay thought I was just some harmless old man. She'd forgotten how many problems I'd solved, how many fights I'd had to win to keep our family afloat all those years. Inside, my little house felt smaller than ever. I sank into the leather recliner my wife, Gloria, had given me for our 40th anniversary. Her memory steadied me. She would have never let anyone walk over our family. Her framed picture watched me from the mantel, her eyes full of the same quiet determination I now felt. I needed a plan. This wasn't just about pride anymore. Lindsay's post was a weapon, one she'd use again and again to undermine me, to control every story, every argument, every family gathering. I picked up my phone and started scrolling. My friend Mike Keller's text was still there. "Some of us know the truth, Walt. Let me know if you need anything." I texted back, asking if he could come over later. I knew Mike had some background in IT, and frankly, I was out of my depth when it came to online battles. Maybe it was time to fight fire with fire. The afternoon crawled by. I tried to distract myself, reading old engineering journals, puttering around in the garage, but my mind kept circling back to Lindsay's smirk, to David's silence, to the cascade of comments under that post. How quickly neighbors could turn, how easily respect could be destroyed. At 4 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Mike stepped inside, laptop bag slung over his shoulder, a serious look in his eyes. We sat in my living room, the air thick with unspoken questions. Mike pulled up the Facebook post on his computer. "You want to fight back?" he asked. "I want the truth out. I want my family to stop treating me like a problem that needs to be solved." He nodded. "You know, Lindsay's been making herself look like a saint for months. She even runs the HOA page, moderates comments, deletes anything negative about her. If you want to fight, we have to be smarter." He clicked through some pages, showing me how public opinion could be swayed, how rumors and lies spread in seconds. "But here's the thing, Walt. Sometimes the skeletons in people's closets are just waiting to come out." He opened a folder. "I didn't want to say anything before, but Lindsay's been covering up some shady things. Misusing HOA funds, charging expenses for community improvements that were actually for her own home, and," he glanced at me, "I can prove it. But if you go public, it's going to get ugly." My pulse pounded. The rules had changed. If Lindsay wanted war, she was about to find out how stubborn an old engineer can be. As the sun set over Maplewood Hills, I realized something for the first time since all this started. I wasn't alone. And I was done being the family scapegoat. That evening, Mike and I sat shoulder to shoulder at my dining table, stacks of documents, and his laptop spread out between us. "Walt, you don't have to use any of this. But if you want your side of the story, you'll need something stronger than just a denial. People believe screenshots, receipts, numbers. It's the only way you'll change the narrative." I looked over the files. There were HOA reports, emails about community garden upgrades that were really for Lindsay's private patio, invoices billed to the HOA but signed off by her alone. "How'd you get all this?" I asked, both amazed and slightly uneasy. Mike grinned. "Let's just say people who think they're untouchable rarely cover their tracks. She's been logging in from the same Wi-Fi for everything. All I had to do was follow the breadcrumbs." It struck me how little I really knew about this new digital world. In my day, the worst gossip traveled from porch to porch, neighbor to neighbor. Now, one post could destroy a man's life in an afternoon. "Is this enough?" I asked. "It's more than enough. She's been using HOA funds for vacations, paying herself consulting fees, even charging groceries as neighborhood events. If you wanted to, you could blow this whole thing up, get her kicked out of the HOA, maybe even bring in the police." That last part made me hesitate. I'd always believed in handling things quietly, privately. I didn't want to ruin my son's marriage, or turn my grandkids' lives upside down. But Lindsay had left me no choice. She'd started this war, and now I was just trying to defend what little honor I had left. "Let me think on it overnight," I told Mike. He nodded, packing away the files, giving my shoulder a firm squeeze. "Whatever you decide. Walt, I'm with you. The neighborhood's tired of her games. You're not alone." After he left, I sat for a long time in the quiet. I looked around at the walls Gloria and I had painted, the photos of fishing trips, birthdays, Christmas mornings. I remembered the days when family meant something, when neighbors watched out for each other, when arguments were settled with a handshake, not a Facebook post. I missed those days. But I wasn't going to be bullied into silence. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, the decision clear in my mind. I wasn't going to let Lindsay get away with this, but I'd do it my way. With respect, with facts, and without stooping to her level. I called Mike and asked him to meet me again after lunch. By noon, I'd written a draft of my own post. I kept it simple. I explained the situation, attached a few key documents showing Lindsay's misuse of HOA funds, just enough to prove my point, and asked the neighborhood for fairness, not sympathy. Mike helped me upload everything, double-checking that it was all true, accurate, and respectful. "You're not stooping to her level, Walt," he said. "You're just making sure people have the truth." I hesitated before hitting post. My hand shook, but it wasn't fear, it was a strange sense of relief. For the first time since this started, I felt like I had some control again. The reaction was instant. Comments started pouring in. I had no idea Lindsay was doing this. "We owe you an apology, Walter. This needs to go to the board." People who'd been silent before, neighbors, old friends, even folks I barely knew, came out of the woodwork with stories of their own. Times Lindsay had bullied them, enforced rules that didn't exist, threatened fines for violations she'd invented on the spot. I sat back in my chair and watched as, one by one, the tide turned. The same people who'd called me senile yesterday were now demanding an emergency HOA meeting. Even the people closest to Lindsay began to question her. My phone rang. It was David. His voice was shaking. "Dad, what is all this? Why didn't you come to me first?" I took a breath, trying to keep the anger out of my voice. "Because you never listen, son. You stood by while your wife tore me down in front of everyone. I had no choice but to defend myself." He was silent for a long moment. I'm sorry, Dad. I really am. I just wanted peace in the family." "Then you should have stood up for it." After I hung up, I felt a weight lift from my chest. For the first time, David sounded less like Lindsay's mouthpiece and more like the boy I remembered. Maybe it wasn't too late for us. Late that afternoon, the neighborhood erupted. The HOA board called an emergency meeting for the next day. My neighbors left fresh cookies on my porch, notes of apology taped to my door. Even Mrs. Connor stopped by to say she was sorry for believing Lindsay's lies. But the real shock came that evening. My phone buzzed, an email, from someone calling themselves Truth Teller. The message was short. "If you want the rest of Lindsay's secrets, meet me at the Oak Ridge Diner, 8 p.m. Come alone." Was it a prank? A trap? Or something more? The sun was setting, painting Maplewood Hills in gold and orange, as I put on my jacket and stepped into the cooling evening. The fight for my reputation wasn't over, not yet. But for the first time, I felt hope. If Lindsay thought she'd won, she hadn't counted on just how stubborn one old grandpa can be. The Oak Ridge Diner was one of those places stuck in time. Vinyl booths, a jukebox nobody ever used, and a waitress who remembered every local's coffee order. I arrived early, nerves tight, half wondering if I was about to walk into some sort of neighborhood ambush. But as the clock ticked past 8, Mike Keller slipped into the booth across from me, glancing around before he spoke. He didn't waste time. "I know I told you most of what I found, Walt. But there's more, stuff I couldn't just put in an email. Lindsay's been hiding money. Thousands, skimmed from HOA dues and shifted into her private accounts. She's got invoices for consulting from fake companies, addresses that don't exist. This goes way beyond petty theft." I stared at him. The truth hitting like a punch. You're telling me Lindsay's been robbing the neighborhood blind? Mike nodded, sliding a manila envelope across the table. Everything you need is in here. Bank statements, email printouts, lists of her online purchases, designer bags, trips to Miami, spa weekends labeled as board retreats. His face was grave. If you bring this to the board, she's done. She might even face charges. It was almost too much to take in. I'd come expecting more drama, maybe threats or blackmail. But this? I'd lived next door to Lindsay for almost a decade, watched her rise from the new wife to queen of the HOA. I never imagined she'd steal from the people she pretended to protect. Mike's eyes softened. You have a choice, Walt. Use it, and you're in for a fight. There'll be fallout. But you'll save your name, and maybe the whole neighborhood. I took the envelope, feeling its weight, and nodded. Thank you, Mike. For everything. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table under the glow of the old pendant lamp, sorting through the evidence. The paper trail was clear. Lindsay had been siphoning money for nearly 2 years, faking maintenance jobs, forging signatures, even deleting emails from concerned neighbors. The arrogance of it all made my blood boil. She'd built her little empire on the backs of people she thought too distracted, too polite, or too old to notice. That night, sleep was impossible. My thoughts kept spinning. If I exposed her, would my son forgive me? Would my grandkids understand? But I kept seeing Gloria's picture, her steady gaze reminding me. Do what's right, even when it's hard. The next morning, I walked to the HOA clubhouse with the folder clutched in my hand. The emergency meeting was already buzzing. Neighbors packed the tiny space, murmurs turning to open stares when I entered. Lindsay sat at the front table, polished as always, pretending nothing was wrong. David hovered behind her, looking like he hadn't slept at all. When my turn came, I didn't waste words. I'm not here to fight old grudges, I started. I'm here because I care about this neighborhood, and I care about my family's name. I have proof that HOA money has been misused, thousands of dollars. I held up the envelope. The evidence is here. It's time we got honest with each other. A hush fell as I passed the papers to the board president, an older woman named Mrs. Stewart. As she leafed through the documents, her face drained of color. The room filled with whispers, some shocked, some angry, some just sad. Lindsay tried to keep her composure, but her voice shook. This is a misunderstanding. Walter's confused. He's been through a lot lately. But it was too late. The facts spoke for themselves. Bank records, invoices, signed checks with forged signatures. One by one, neighbors turned on Lindsay, voices rising in accusation. You charged us for repairs that never happened. That community picnic was just your family's beach trip. We trusted you, Lindsay. Even David looked at her with something like horror. Is it true? He whispered, but Lindsay was already backing toward the door, face pale, mouth working silently for an excuse that never came. The board called for a full audit, suspending Lindsay from her duties immediately. She fled the clubhouse, her composure gone, and David followed, looking 10 years older than the day before. After the meeting, neighbors approached me, shaking my hand, offering apologies, promising things would change. Some even admitted they'd been afraid to speak out before. You saved us, Walt, Mrs. Stewart told me, her eyes misty. We owe you more than we can say. But victory felt bittersweet. Back home, I stared at the empty house, wondering if I'd lost my family for good. The phone sat silent on the kitchen counter. No messages from David. No texts from my grandkids. Just quiet, the kind that aches. That night, I sat on the porch, the Ohio stars crisp and cold overhead, thinking of all I'd built, and all I might have lost. Was doing the right thing enough when it cost so much? I was about to turn in when headlights swept across the yard. David's truck rolled to a stop, and he stepped out slowly, hands shoved deep in his pockets. He walked up the porch steps and sat beside me without a word. For a long moment, we just sat together in the dark, father and son, two generations bruised by the same storm. Finally, David spoke, voice raw. "You did what you had to, Dad. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I should have believed you." I gripped his shoulder, words failing me, feeling something old and deep start to heal. The world was different now, but for the first time in days, I let myself hope that family could survive even the roughest truth. The next few days felt like I was living in the aftermath of a tornado. News spread through Maplewood Hills faster than I could have imagined. People stopped me at the grocery store, the post office, even on my morning walks. Some apologized, others offered support, and more than a few neighbors shared stories of their own run-ins with Lindsay. It was as if, overnight, all the fear and resentment she'd created had come to the surface. The HOA board met again that week, this time without Lindsay at the table. Mrs. Stewart asked me to sit in, just until things settled down. I declined politely but firmly. "I'm not looking for power," I told her. "I just wanted fairness and a little peace." She nodded, understanding more than I could say. Mike Keller was there, too, smiling quietly in the corner. He'd become something of a neighborhood hero, though he always insisted it was my courage, not his computer skills, that turned the tide. "You know," he told me over coffee at the diner, "people like Lindsay count on silence. Once someone speaks up, everything changes." He was right. But for me, the hardest silence was still at home. I hadn't heard from my grandkids, and every evening the house felt bigger and emptier. Gloria's photo by my reading chair reminded me that family was worth fighting for, even when it hurt. Then, late one afternoon, the phone rang. It was my granddaughter, Ellie. She sounded uncertain, older than her 10 years. "Grandpa, Dad said we can visit you this weekend. Is that okay?" I felt a lump rise in my throat, relief and gratitude tangled together. "Of course, honey. I'd love nothing more." She hesitated, then added quietly, "Mom's not coming. She's busy." The sadness in her voice was unmistakable, and it broke my heart all over again. Saturday morning, I baked chocolate chip cookies, the way Gloria used to, and put on the old baseball cap Ellie had given me for Christmas. The doorbell rang just after noon, and in tumbled Ellie, her brother Mason, and David. Their laughter, their noise, their simple presence filled the house with life I hadn't felt in weeks. We played board games, grilled hot dogs out back, and, as evening settled in, sat on the porch swing watching fireflies rise from the grass. Ellie curled up beside me, head on my shoulder. "Are you okay, Grandpa?" she asked, her voice small. I looked down at her, at Mason chasing lightning bugs across the yard, at David watching us with a strange mix of pride and regret. "I am now," I answered. "Sometimes you have to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. Family is supposed to take care of each other." Ellie nodded, her hair tickling my arm. "I'm glad you did, Grandpa. I knew you weren't what Mom said on the computer." The kids' visit ended too soon. When David loaded them into his truck that evening, he lingered on the porch. "I don't know what happens next with Lindsay," he admitted, looking at the driveway instead of me. "She says she wants to leave town, start over somewhere else. I don't know if I can forgive her, but I don't want to lose my family either." I squeezed his shoulder, the gesture meaning more than words ever could. "Whatever happens, I'll always be here for you and the kids. That's what fathers and grandfathers are for." That night, as I washed the last cookie tray, my phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from the HOA board, a formal request for my testimony at an upcoming audit hearing. The county had been notified. Lindsay might be facing more than just community shame. For a moment, I hesitated. Part of me still wanted to just let things go. But then I thought about all the people she'd hurt. All the trust she'd broken, all the elders in the neighborhood who'd been bullied into silence. I typed a simple reply. I'll be there. The truth matters. Days blurred into one another. The audit hearing was tense. Lindsay, looking tired and shrunken, sat between her lawyer and a cluster of files. Evidence was read out loud, line by line, every fake invoice and forged check exposed in public. Neighbors gave statements, some angry, some crying. I took the stand last, telling my story plainly, without malice. The final decision came quickly. Lindsay was permanently removed from the board, ordered to repay thousands, and banned from holding any community office again. The county sheriff's office opened a case on the missing funds. The neighborhood, once divided, felt suddenly lighter, like everyone could breathe again. That evening, as I sat in my armchair, the house finally peaceful, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Gloria's picture caught the last of the sunset. "You'd have been proud," I whispered. "Not just of me, but of the whole neighborhood." The road ahead would still be rocky. David had decisions to make. My grandkids would have questions, hurts that would take time to heal. But for the first time in a long time, I felt hope, not just for myself, but for everyone who had ever been told to keep quiet, to sit down, to disappear. As the first stars blinked over Maplewood Hills, I realized that maybe, just maybe, the best years of my life weren't all behind me after all. A week after the audit, Maplewood Hills felt like a new place. Neighbors smiled more. Board meetings actually ended with handshakes instead of shouting matches. There were block parties and potlucks again, things we hadn't done since before Lindsay took over everything. Sometimes, I'd see folks pause and look over at my house, giving me a little wave or a thumbs up, like they were checking if the old man was really all right. But if I'm honest, the nights were still hardest. The house was quieter than ever, the echoes of all I'd lost lingering in every room. I missed the way Gloria used to fill the silence with humming and soft laughter. I missed hearing Mason clomp through the hallway or Ellie's piano practice drifting down the stairs. Some losses you never really get used to. Still, every morning, I found something to do. I started volunteering at the community center, teaching kids how to build birdhouses, sharing stories with other retirees. It helped. Doing good, even small things, always helped. The real surprise came from Mike Keller. He'd become a genuine friend, not just a neighborhood tech guy. One morning, he stopped by with coffee and a grin. "You'll never guess who called me," he said, eyes twinkling. "Channel 4 News wants to interview you about the HOA story." I almost choked on my donut. Me? On television? Good Lord, I'd barely figured out how to use a smartphone. He laughed. "You're the reason things changed around here, Walt. People want to know how you did it." At first, I wanted nothing to do with it. I'd always preferred to solve problems quietly. But Mike talked me into it, said it might help other folks in the same spot. So, a few days later, a reporter and her cameraman came by. She was young, kind, asked questions about community and family, and why I decided to speak up. I told the truth. "You get to my age," I said, "and folks start acting like you don't have anything left to offer. But that's when you know who you really are. I just wanted my family's name cleared, and I wanted the truth to win for once." The interview aired that night. Neighbors started calling, not just from Maplewood Hills but from all over town. Some asked for advice. Others just wanted to say thanks. One woman said her HOA was going through something similar, her voice shaking as she promised she'd finally speak up. But not everyone was happy. Lindsay's family called David, demanding I retract my slander. A lawyer sent a letter, threatening a lawsuit, but the evidence spoke louder than any threats. The truth had set things in motion that couldn't be stopped. David struggled the most. He tried to hold his marriage together, but Lindsay grew angrier, more distant, blaming everyone but herself. In the end, she packed her things and left town. I'll never forget the look on my son's face the day she drove away, grief and relief all mixed together. He stayed with me that first night, barely speaking, just sitting on the porch while I brewed us both tea. I thought I was doing the right thing by standing by her, he finally said, staring at the darkness. But I lost sight of what was right. I lost you. I'm sorry, Dad. I put an arm around his shoulder. You never lost me. You just lost your way for a while. Family forgives, even when it hurts. That was the first night in months I slept all the way through. As spring drifted into summer, things began to heal. The kids came more often, sometimes just for ice cream, sometimes to spend whole weekends with me, running wild in the backyard like they used to. Ellie helped me plant a row of sunflowers along the fence, saying Gloria would have loved them. Mason took an interest in woodworking, and together we started a birdhouse project for every neighbor who wanted one. The board voted in a new HOA president, a retired firefighter named Bill Armstrong. Honest, fair, no patience for nonsense. He asked if I'd be his advisor, and though I hesitated at first, I agreed. It felt good to be trusted again, to use all those years of experience for something positive. Mike got a promotion at work, but we still met for coffee every week. He'd started a Neighborhood Watch email group, so nobody would ever be bullied by a board member again. One evening in June, as the fireflies blinked in the yard and the crickets sang their steady song, I sat on my porch swing, a glass of lemonade in hand. The air smelled like lilacs and fresh-cut grass. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful. I thought about everything that had happened, the pain, the betrayal, the fight for my reputation. I thought about how close I'd come to giving up, to letting the world shrink around me. But in standing up for myself, I'd found something better. Not just respect from others, but from myself. And I'd remembered something Gloria used to tell me. We don't get to choose what life throws at us. We only get to choose who we become because of it. Maplewood Hills had changed, and so had I. The old man who was supposed to disappear had helped his neighbors find their voice. And in doing that, maybe I'd found my own again. A soft breeze rustled the sunflowers. Ellie and Mason chased each other across the yard, fireflies swirling around them like tiny stars. For the first time in a long while, I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. Summer faded into early fall, bringing cool mornings and the scent of turning leaves. Maplewood Hills seemed brighter than it had in years, as if the whole neighborhood had been washed clean by the truth. People stopped to chat at the mailbox, kids zipped past on bikes, and there was a sense of belonging I hadn't felt since Gloria passed. Life, as they say, had a way of circling back to what really mattered. One Saturday, the HOA threw its first real community picnic in years. No fake expenses, no secret consulting fees. Just families sharing casseroles and stories under a sky clear as glass. I sat at a picnic table with Bill Armstrong and Mike Keller, watching Mason and Ellie race around with other kids. Neighbors came over, clapped me on the back, and thanked me for not giving up. I shook every hand, feeling pride and a bit of humility. I'd never set out to be a hero, just an old man trying to keep his dignity. After the picnic, as I walked home through crunchy leaves, David caught up to me. He looked lighter than I'd seen him in months, more like the boy who used to follow me everywhere, asking questions about how things worked. "Dad," he said quietly, "I can't thank you enough. I know everything got ugly, but you saved more than just your own name. You gave this whole neighborhood a second chance." I stopped, studying his face, and for a moment, all the pain of the past months faded. "You're my son. I'd do it all again, even if it hurt. That's what family means." He nodded, then surprised me by pulling me into a hug. "I want you to know, I'm working hard to be a better dad to Ellie and Mason. I won't let them forget where they come from, or what it means to stand up for the truth." After he left, I lingered in my front yard, watching the sky blush pink and orange as the sun set behind the old maple trees. For years I'd worried that time would slowly erase my place in this world. Now I saw things clearer. Legacies aren't built in silence, but in the courage to speak up when it counts. As the days grew shorter, I found new routines that gave my life meaning. I taught woodworking classes at the community center, helped Bill and the board rewrite the HOA's bylaws to protect every resident, and spent every Sunday dinner with David and the kids. We laughed more. We talked about everything: mistakes, forgiveness, and what it meant to never give up on each other. One evening, Ellie asked if I would help her with her first school essay. The topic was a time I was proud of my family. She wrote about the day she and Mason returned to my house and saw, for the first time, how many neighbors really cared about her grandpa. She wrote about standing up for what's right, even when people tried to make you small. As she read her essay aloud, her voice wavered with pride and love. Tears stung my eyes. For all the years I thought I'd lost, I realized I'd gained something better: a family who knew the cost of truth, and a neighborhood built on trust again. Lindsay's story ended quietly. The authorities made her pay back most of what she'd taken. She moved to another state, changed her name, and disappeared from social media. Sometimes I wondered if she ever regretted what she'd done, but I stopped letting her choices haunt me. We all live with what we build, good or bad. Months passed, and Maplewood Hills kept moving forward. The board elections were fair, honest, and open. New faces brought new ideas, and no one person was ever allowed to take over again. When Christmas rolled around, Ellie and Mason helped me string lights across the porch. We invited the neighbors for hot chocolate, laughter echoing late into the cold, starry night. That winter, on what would have been Gloria's birthday, I sat with her photograph by the fire. "We made it through, old girl," I whispered. "The family's okay. The neighborhood's stronger. And your sunflowers are taller than ever. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that growing older doesn't mean fading away. Sometimes the toughest battles come when you least expect them, but the reward is rediscovering your own voice, and helping others find theirs too. So here I sit, a little grayer, a little slower, but more grateful than I've ever been. Life goes on, and as long as there's breath in my chest, I'll keep standing up for what matters. For my family. For my friends. For the little neighborhood that found its heart again. Because the truth, once spoken, can change the world, even if it's just one street at a time. And that's more than enough for this old grandpa.